I talk a lot on my channel about my personal views and opinions. However, I've never really gone into depths as to how I got there, or rather, those who got me there. But I think it's time. So, this is the story of how a trans person turned me into a conservative. Okay, so I'll be honest, the intro is a little clickbaity. First of all, I don't consider myself to be a conservative, although some will, especially radical leftists. I consider myself to be a centrist. And it also wasn't just one person that changed my views overnight. I'll explain. It wasn't just one direct instance. While there is one instance, one person that was the catalyst for me going over the edge, there was definitely more. It's important for me to mention one thing. In order for me to become something, I had to be something beforehand. And what I was a hard leftist. I was your typical leftist activist with the classic talking points that we all expect. I backed Black Lives Matter. I voted for Joe Biden. I would have voted for Hillary. And I hated Trump. Do I sound like I'm checking off all the stereotypical boxes? Because in hindsight, to myself, I hear it and I sound like I was pretty brainwashed to me. And that's because I was brainwashed. I was only 14 when Hillary announced her run for presidency, using gay people as ornaments in her campaign video, 15 when Donald Trump became president, and I was about maybe 16, 18 when Black Lives Matter rose to prominence, and I was 18 when I voted for Joe Biden. Why? Because since I was a little kid, I was targeted by people like Hillary Clinton to Pokemon Go to the polls.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
Attention must be brought to the fact that the young people of our country, who are statistically more likely to start off left-leaning, are directly targeted to be that way. This specific vulnerable group is targeted by the media, by the corporations, and by billionaires like George Soros. There is an up-and-coming industry in this country that trades a very specific kind of currency: oppression. And young people are worth the most. The older they get, the more likely they are to wake up. If you get them early, it is highly likely that you can have them forever. It's earlier and earlier every time that we see it. 15-year-olds getting mastectomies, Jazz Jennings starting her transition as a small child, toddler-aged boys being called girls simply for liking playing with the girls, or maybe dressing up or playing in makeup. Something is going on within our schools. Having first-hand experiences from high school, I can earnestly tell you that. For as long as I can remember, I was a big supporter of anything LGBT. To me personally, it was always about love is love. Or so I thought. Because of all that, I considered myself a big ally to all the causes. I had a lot of respect for the Trevor Project and the Human Rights Campaign. So it was interesting to me when I somehow found myself on the oppressor side of the stick, according to the individual that I was speaking to. Story time. So obviously, I'm not going to include any names. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a little foggy on how we got to that specific topic. But anyway, so this was in senior year of high school. This was right before Cornova
Don't be afraid of Cornova.
really fucked things up for the rest of the world, which is when everybody pretty much started talking about this whole gender ideology bullshit. That's pretty much when it took hold, at least from what I can remember. Let me know if it happened earlier. I can't really remember anybody talking about it before 2019. But anyway, I was in the office and there was this guy who also happened to be gay. He was in my grade. And we're in the office, and I'm not really too sure. I'm a little foggy on how we actually got to the topic of trans people. I believe it's because we were talking about pronouns. I think somebody asked me or somebody for their pronouns, and I'm not really too sure how we got on the topic. I think that we were talking about the fact that I personally was confused about pronouns because somebody brought it up again. I think somebody asked about them, asked me or somebody else in the room about them. And I started talking about it and I was like, "Oh, I don't really understand the whole pronoun thing. Like it's a little it's like obvious usually. Like pronouns are a visual thing for the most part." And people like Blair White, who's actually transgender, has talked about the fact that for the most part, gender is one of those things that usually by using secondary sex characteristics, you can automatically tell, at least the brain can automatically tell whether or not you are male or female.
I think pronouns boil down to, rather than chromosomes, I think secondary sex characteristics, which are still biological, but it really does kind of boil down to what you look like, in my opinion.
And that's pretty much what I was talking about. I was talking about the fact that they are a little bit ridiculous when, for the most part, using secondary sex characteristics, you can usually tell what people are. And after that, when it comes to the whole pronoun thing, if somebody wants to go through the process of telling you that, that's a different story. But pretty much using your eyes, the brain can usually tell apart which is which. And that's what I was talking about. And somehow, this individual, this again, gay boy my age, goes, "Well, you are cis, so it doesn't really matter, you know?" And I was like, "I'm what?" And he was like, "You're cis." And I was like, "What is that?" I Again, this was before all of those terms took at least for me, I hadn't heard of those terms before 2019. So this is when at least in the zeitgeist of the general population, people were learning about those terms. I didn't know what that was. And he was like, "Well, you're cis, so it doesn't matter." And I was like, "What is that?" And he tells me, "Oh, cis means that you are the gender that you assign yourself or whatever the fuck with the gender that you were born with. Basically, that you are the same gender that you were born as and you haven't changed your gender or your pronouns, whatever." And I literally said, "I'm not cis anything. You can be cis whatever you want. I am not cis anything. You're not going to go ahead and create some new term for me just because you want to I don't know, make yourself fit in more. You're not going to create a new terminology for people when, for the beginning of time, everybody has been using he, she, girl, boy, ma'am, sir. It hasn't really been that difficult for previous generations." And again, I simply said, "You can be cis whatever you want. I am not cis anything, and you are not going to tell me what I am, because that would basically go against your ideology. How are you going to tell somebody what they are? I am not cis anything." And obviously, it didn't take long before this individual and I started to go back and forth. And it was an interesting exchange for the most part. Whenever people get called out for saying shit that doesn't make any sense, usually the only thing that they're going to go ahead and regurgitate to is either repeat the same talking points or try and use personal attacks. And this individual chose both. Pretty much after that conversation, this individual acted super rude towards me and was very dismissive of my existence. So nothing against them, whatever. But it just goes to show you how when you say something that makes sense against this group of people, against people like this that have this kind of ideology, no matter what you say, you are still going to be the villain. So that's why I am on here choosing to run my mouth, because at the end of the day, it's not going to make a difference for those people. They're not going to listen. I'm going to say something that I don't really think I've ever commented on my channel before, at least not from what I can remember. But I'm going to say it now. You can call yourself whatever you want. You can make whatever name for yourself that you want. You can go by whatever you want. At the end of the day, I believe in freedom. So if you want to call yourself whatever you want, you can have the freedom to do so. As long as you are not hurting anybody and you are of age, you can do whatever you want. But you don't get to create a new term for me to make yourself fit in more, to make yourself feel more normal. You don't get to all of a sudden be the one that gets referred to as male or female, and then all of a sudden I'm cis male or cis female. You don't get to create new terminology to make yourself the center of attention. I don't think that's talked about enough. But after that instance, I felt immediately othered. That was the first moment, the first crack to the glass where I felt like I wasn't really in the same mindset, or I didn't fit in to the ideals that everybody else had. That was the first, that was weird, that I dealt with. There was more, and in fact, I did mention that there was indeed something that tipped me over the edge. And while I can't blame it for my entire change of opinion, it's certainly a big, if not the biggest part of it. Again, for obvious reasons, I will not be including this individual's name or the names of anybody else that I will be mentioning in this story. I want to preface this story by saying that I knew this individual for quite a long time. I knew them for quite a few years, pretty much my entire high school experience, and about a year or two after I graduated high school. So this is a person that I knew very well. We had told each other a lot of private information. We had shared a lot of crazy stories and things that we had been through in life. We both pretty much been through a lot. So we shared all of those stories with each other. This is a person that I can say I knew very well for the most part. And I say that because I don't want anybody to think that this is just a person that I knew in passing, someone that I didn't know very well, that I just, somebody that wasn't very important to my life. This was a very important person to my life, and we were very close. I knew a lot about this person, and this person knew a lot about me. And I'll get more into that in just a second. But I say that because, again, I don't want anybody to think that this is just a random trans person that I knew. No, this story is very personal to me. And again, it's one of the reasons why it was the catalyst and the biggest reasons for me changing my entire opinion on not just gender ideology, but the entire LGBT community. This individual was just your average stereotypical gay boy, and at some point throughout high school, we both had crushes on each other. So again, just two gay guys, basically, two gay teenagers. One day, this was after graduating high school. I had already known him for about maybe 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. And it had gotten to a point I had mentioned just a second ago how we had often been we had crushes on each other. We were very flirty with each other throughout high school. Eventually it got to the point where all of that died down and it was very friendly, and it stayed friendly for a very, very, very long time until, again, this one specific moment. And this one specific moment wasn't too crazy. Long story short, we were hanging out, and then as things happened, we were watching a movie, and all we did was just watch the movie. We were basically just laying in bed. We were cuddling as people do. And I mentioned this story because, again, this whole time, this individual is a boy. We had talked about boy troubles. We had both been in relationships before. We had been in relationships at the same time. And so, again, the whole time, a boy. The whole time, a boy. Never any sort of inclination that this individual was a girl. And again, I want to say this again. I knew a lot about this individual, and I knew people that were also very, very, very close to this individual. We pretty much all went to the same school. So I can tell you that if there was ever a story to be told, I think I would have heard it at some point, and I never did. And to be honest with you, I don't know if these individuals will admit to that, but I don't think that they had heard or had any inclination of a story like that either until they were convinced of that case by this person. Not the point, though. Not too long after this innocent, intimate moment between me and this guy, maybe a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, this person starts to disappear, starts acting strange, starts acting distant, starts acting like something was wrong. And this individual had had personal issues going on in their life for a very long time. Again, I'm not going to go into this because I don't want anybody to find out who this individual is and attack this individual, but this person had already gone through certain things in their life. And so I was just, as a friend, assuming that things happen, you know? Sometimes you feel like things in your life are very heavy and it's hard. And so me as a friend, I was pretty much just going to comfort this person. And I go to this individual's home to, I think that I don't know, I'm that kind of person. I think that I had brought them like a little care package, and then I had gone to his house and we're hanging out, whatever, very innocent, nothing too crazy. We're hanging out, watching a movie. Um, and he basically tells me that he had something to tell me. It's like, okay, sure, whatever, not a big deal. I like a story. And so we're talking, and he goes, yeah. So I don't know, like, I just wanted to mention it to you, but I am a trans woman. I'm a woman. And so I was like, okay, sure, awesome. Like, this was at that point, I was still very left leaning. And so didn't even question it. I was like, okay, awesome, perfect, cool. And to my knowledge, again, at that point, yes, I was very left leaning, but I feel like for a very long time, being transgender was very common sense. If you're transgender, you're transitioning from one gender to the other, meaning that you are going to make the effort to appear like the gender you're trying to transition to. Because if not, then what's the point of being transgender, transgender? What's the point of being transgender if there's no transition, if you're not making any sort of changes to appear like said gender? And so it was a shock to me for that reason when I had asked this individual, okay, awesome, cool. I'm happy for you. This is great. I'm glad that you came to this realization. I don't know if I asked, how do you know? I don't think we got to that part of things. I don't think that we got there. I believe I just asked questions like, how are you feeling? How is, whatever, how's your mental state? And then I was noticing how this individual had come out to me as transgender, but there was no changes going on. And at this point, keep in mind that I was not the first person that this individual had come out to. They had already come out to the main friend group that they spoke with, and for the most part, I believe the main members of their family. And there was no change in the way that they appeared. And so, me, obviously, being an old school gay guy at this point, I guess, an old school liberal, I asked a simple question of, okay, you're transgender. When are you going to transition? What first steps are you going to take to transition? Again, transgender, transition. I wasn't asking the question of, are you going to have sex reassignment surgery? Are you going to snip off your penis? Not what I was going to ask. I don't want anybody to think, oh, I was immediately asking the question about, are you going to cut off your genitals? I don't care. That's none of my business. I was asking them, what changes are you going to make to affirm yourself as the woman that you're saying that you are? And to my surprise, to my shock, to this day, I will never forget it because, again, it is the catalyst for why I think the way that I think. The answer that I received was, I don't need to transition. I am a woman. And I wrote it down so that I wouldn't forget exactly how it was phrased. I don't need to transition. I am a woman. In fact, it was, I don't need to do anything to transition. See, I was going to forget how the phrasing went. I don't need to do anything to transition. I am a woman. And I specify because the phrasing is very important. I don't need to do anything to transition. I am a woman. And I say that because this individual that I knew, emphasis on knew, for a multitude of reasons, this individual that I knew looked exactly as you would think a feminine gay boy would look. No offense to this individual, but this individual was basically just James Charles. And James Charles is still a boy. And that's okay. And I think it must be said that when trauma affects you in your life, I think that you are more susceptible to things like this taking hold. I think it must be commented on. But it was crazy to me how you are telling me that you are a woman and you want me to affirm you in your gender. You want me to say she. You want me to view you as a female so that you will feel better about yourself. You want me to see you as a female. I can't because you are not making the steps to look female. Again, being transgender means you're going to transition. And by all means, you're welcome to disagree with me on being transgender, on trans people. Fuck it. You're welcome to disagree with me on gay people. I say this as a gay person. You do you. Watch my content because there's things that we agree on, and watch my content because there's things that we're going to disagree on. That's okay. But for the most part, the long-standing knowledge was that if you are transgender, you're going to do everything you can to transition. That's why the term transsexual is my preferred term for people like this. And by people like this, I mean people who actually transition, not people who are transgender, which is an important differentiation to make. The difference between transsexual and transgender, because these days they're no longer the same. Transsexuals are people who transition. Transgender people at this point is literally anybody, because even non-binary people are considered transgender now. And they don't even believe in gender that way. They want to be they thems. They don't even believe in gender. So what transition to gender are they making? Transgender, transition, gender. It is in the fucking word. This should not be that difficult to understand. That's it. If we are going to say that something is something, that something exists, girl, let's get some guidelines, because to be gay, it is easy. Like men and be a man, like women and be a woman, bisexual, men, woman, like men, woman. The rules are simple. The guidelines are simple. For a long time, being transgender meant you were going to transition. And so when you are a full-blown man that just 2 weeks earlier I was cuddling in a bed with, and now you're telling me 2 weeks later that suddenly you are a woman, then if we're speaking by your logic, I'm straight now. And I'm not. So, unfortunately, you do not get to play both sides of the coin. You don't get to say that you're transgender and that you're a woman now and then not show the secondary sex characteristics of a woman. Like, it literally doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. It really doesn't make any sense. It is redundant, period. The moment I heard that, it was like something in me clicked and I woke up. You haven't taken any steps to transition, and you want me to affirm your gender as a woman when you couldn't look more and act more like a stereotypical gay boy. And again, there's nothing wrong with being a stereotypical gay boy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my biggest issue with the mass psychosis movement that is gender ideology. The self-ID problem. Because somehow before this person even had the opportunity to go to a psychologist, a psychiatrist, they were already asking me to affirm them as a woman when they looked like a boy. And like I said, while it wasn't the only instance, it was the biggest instance. It was the catalyst for me looking into things and being like, something is weird here. And then not too long after that, that's when I started coming across red pill content. Specifically though, and I don't even know if you could call this red pill content, that's just the term that people use online for that kind of stuff. Things like gays against groomers, libs of TikTok, woke TikToks compilations that I've reacted to on my channel before. I started finding things like that, things trending on the internet, other gay people that saw what was going on in the world and said, no, this is weird. This is odd. There's something going on to our children. There's something going on with the young people of this country that is affecting their mental health. There is something going on. There is. Those social media pages, listening to people go on and on about crazy shit and pronouns and neo-pronouns and just out of the box things, listening to videos coming out from detransitioners, simply listening to the rhetoric among my generation. I'm only 21 years old. Simply listening to the rhetoric among my generation and seeing how radical it's become. Seeing how everyone is a radical leftist with aggressive ideas and scary Marxist values. I'm a strong believer that just listening, letting people rant, giving people the comfort of the benefit of the doubt is the easiest way to get the full and whole truth out of people. Once I heard the radical beliefs from the horse's mouth, my opinion didn't just change. As a gay man, my entire outlook on the gay community and my role in it was tilted on its head. You can say something cheesy and say I woke up. That's a good analogy. But I would say I was shaken awake. After hearing the things I've heard and seeing the things I've seen, it was hard for me not to see what was pretty much staring at me right in the face. After being protected, loved, nurtured, and raised by women, hearing a man that I knew for many years tell me that they didn't need to do anything to be a woman because they already were one was a slap in the face. If you can think of anybody that you've had in your life, somebody that you've known for a long time, maybe through high school, who's become a far leftist, your typical colored hair, maybe a bald head, suddenly has really weird pronouns in the bio, do me a quick favor. Go on their Instagram and scroll to 2020 before Cornova fucked the world. You can also try late 2019. I'll give you a second to check. Did they look normal? Just like themselves? The answer is probably yes, right? Yeah, I know. Because that was the exact timeline for this individual that I knew personally. And it was also the same timeline for people I knew or went to high school with. And you can also try people from social media, just random people from social media. You can do this little check with anybody. I'm not exactly too sure what happened to some of us when we were locked in our homes, but something definitely happened. And to me, it's proof that all of this is a phase, a farce, a case of mass hysteria. Unfortunately, like I discussed in my interview with Shapeshifter, this episode of mass hysteria comes with medicalization as an option. Do not fall for the fake moral argument that this is anything like the civil rights movement or anything like the gay rights movement, because it's not. You don't have to cut off limbs to be gay or to have the right to marry whoever you want, regardless of race or sexuality. There is a social contagion going on where the young people of this country are choosing neo-pronouns, literally identifying as animals to be able to get by in life. And some truly don't believe that there is a problem going on in the West. I want to end this video on a very important point. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to learn something that you didn't know before and change your stance on a subject. It's okay for you to see the barbaric surgeries that are performed on transgender people and be a little cautious, if not very cautious, about gender-affirming care. Your opinions are allowed to change, and they will change, and that's okay. I'm a firm believer that free speech is very, very important. I don't agree with her on everything, but I do agree with Candace Owens when she says that the answer to speech that we don't agree with is just more speech.
It's good to be an idiot and to be able to grow up and to reform your opinions. I want to allow children, I want to allow students time to shape and become human beings. I don't reserve the same amount of compassion for adults. I don't. When I say adults, I'm talking about people that were in the real world. Yes, I'm aware students are 18, 19, 20, 21, but they have never been in the real world. They've just been in the school system all this time, telling people, being told rather by people what their ideas should be. And then when reality smacks them, like reality smacked me, and they get out into the real world, all of their opinions that they felt so passionate about shift. They do.
If an idea is bad, let's talk about it. Let's help each other see things differently. Let's help each other gain some new perspectives. That's how we got the great thinkers that people still talk about today. Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, Confucius. Notice how long ago these great thinkers were alive, during a time when it was okay to think about and challenge each other's ideas. We've forgotten how to think, but most importantly, we've forgotten how to challenge each other. The power of debate can never be understated. So to people like this, who call me a right-wing loser because I won't give a thumbs up to gender ideology or the paper shredder that is woke culture, you and others like you are upset that I hold a mirror to the bullshit in our community that has gone uncalled for too long. And you're right. I'm not like other gays. I don't align myself with radical leftist behavior. But it should be noted, I've never aligned myself with radical right-wing behavior either. I didn't leave the left left me. Simply put, I'm not sorry. If you're gonna try to guilt me to be on the right side of history, I have a feeling that the side of history that didn't encourage children to cut off limbs will stand the test of time. Okay, well, I know that this one is gonna ruffle quite a bit of feathers, so if you liked what I had to say, give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. That's okay. If you're new around here, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. I would like to see you stick around. And if you have something to say, which I'm assuming that many people are going to, we'll have a discussion in the comments. I'll see you on the next one.